Hello, and we're back in the usual place. It's been a while. It's almost a month since we've done this. Eh?
Yep, it's been a minute.
Last time we did this was Christmas dinner.
Yeah, actually.
Some week or so before Christmas.
That was good fun.
Did you guys have a good restful, festive season?
It was actually. Yeah.
Are you able to put restful and festive in the same sentence?
No.
And we've got a white guy on the show today. Sam, welcome to the show. Sam Osai.
Thank you, man.
Sam and I went to school together.
Oh, fantastic.
Many years
Yes,
ago.
okay.
And I know, I mean, he's gone and done bigger, greater things. It's hard to believe that we were taught the same stuff at school. Yeah, but we can't all be great, right?
Such is life.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Sam. And soon we'll get to talking about why you're on the show. There's no glass on the table, but Sam's got a glass of water there. What are you drinking?
I'm having great tea for once.
Yeah.
Trying Tinashe's boring beverages. It's actually
heated shrub juice.
Yes, it's actually not that bad, except for the heat.
And why are you having heated shrub juice?
It's January, so tradition dictates that we take a month off the sauce and detox a little bit, and then we get back to the more interesting beverages in February.
No, I won't have behind tradition. I'm having cinnamon tea from Uganda that I bought for Tinashe, and you never tasted months ago.
No, I did actually.
Did you like it?
Not quite, but it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah.
I can't complain.
And I'm not having this.
But I will complain of it.
I'm not having this for traditional reasons. I'm having it for purely health reasons.
Okay.
Yeah. December was, shall we say, interesting, and my body needs a bit of a cleanser. Okay.
Okay, so I've got this detox tea.
And what
I
are you
hope you're gonna
detoxing
try
from?
it.
Is it
Well,
actually
from a lot of
Working as your
toxins.
tea top.
Is it actually
You know what,
possible
a lot
to
of our
detox?
food? Yeah, no, a lot of our food is, has a lot of toxins, and it's always good to detox.
I think the
it's
detox
called
industry.
Buchu tea, and
Buchu or Guchu?
Buchu.
Guchu.
Boo.
Guchu.
Yeah, so that's what I'm having.
I think the detox industry.
And what happened to your hair?
Is a big fraud. Eh?
What do you think? So, it's a funny story. We started the year, and I went to my barber, and he was feeling quite adventurous. So he thought, you know what, let me try something. And I thought, why not?
It's not bad actually.
You
Yeah,
reckon?
you look about 5 years younger.
No, I think he looks older.
No, I think old is the beard, right?
That's the grey hair.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, okay, let me try it.
No,
Let's
it's not
see.
bad.
Let's see
Not
what
bad.
happens.
not that what we think matters.
No,
I think there's other people
actually,
whose opinions you
Actually,
care
I
about.
don't value your opinions at all, especially on matters,
Sartorial.
sartorial or esoteric, actually.
Oh, really?
Although, surprisingly enough, you're looking particularly dashing. I love the bow tie and. the
Is that
jacket.
tweed?
No, it's
It's a
not.
little thicker. I think it's wool, but
Yeah, that's
that would
wool.
be a
It's a light wool.
160. No. Oh, come on. I can
He looks like he's
It's
retired.
a 160, 170 wool, and that's heavy. It should be a 110. A 110 wool is light, but this is heavy. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You know what they say about gentlemen and weather?
No, it's very hot in here. Sorry, Sam. We're completely forgetting you there.
No problem.
What are you having?
I didn't push the boat out that bad over Christmas, but water is the way to go. Cleanses all things. But yeah, after watching all your shows, I feel close, probably too close to the whiskey. But water will do.
I'm sure you can smell it from there.
Not yet. I need to get a bit closer.
I must say, you're looking very smart.
Okay, thank you.
You're in a suit. Has
I'm a little
anyone ever
closer
worn a
to the
suit
window.
on the show? I have actually. Once.
Yeah, no. Remember Victor? Yeah, we've had a couple of guests that were,
The suits,
Nigel. Yeah.
Yes,
No,
yes.
usually it's you're the guys who are usually the old ones out. Otherwise, everybody does actually try.
Oh, you're looking dapper. We're quite impressed.
Well done.
Yeah, you actually look like you know what you're talking about.
Mm.
We've got another guest who, in typical style, and I can make fun of him because we've become friends of late. Simba, he's arrived late and he's going to make a grand entrance. So, Simba, would you like to come on set?
Thank you.
Look at him.
Hi, Simba.
How are you?
Pleased to meet you.
Hi, Simba.
Thanks.
Hi, Simba.
Hey guys.
So, how are you doing?
Good.
Good to see you, man. Yeah.
I'm assuming I'm sitting here.
Yes.
Yes.
You sit there and you don't get because
That's
you're
a
late.
safe assumption.
Because you're
Yeah.
late, you don't get a choice on what to
Okay.
drink. You are sharing that
Detox tea.
That horrid thing.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
but
thank
it's
you.
actually quite nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I suspected you guys might do that, so I had a bit before I came here. That's why I was late, so that I can participate in the tea.
And now you
No,
got something to detox from.
I'm joking. I'm actually having a dry January, so this is very much welcome.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show, gents. Oh, and we've got some sushi. I popped by a sushi shop. Like the idea of Friday drinks with no alcohol and nothing else. Just
Didn't sit well with you.
no, it was worse than not sitting well. My stomach literally turned at the thought. So please feel free to participate in the sushi. Welcome to the show, gents. Maybe
About the
Simba,
teas.
you could kick us off and tell us what it is you do and why we might be wanting to have you in our number today.
Nia shouldn't have come last. Anyway,
That's your punishment.
that is my punishment.
Fortunately, the most expensive thing you'd have to buy today
Uh-huh.
is a cup of tea.
That's all right. I think I can do that. So yeah, well, my name is Simba Chinyemba. I'm the group CEO for Kubimba Mining House. I've been so for maybe going on just 18 months now, I think. Kubimba Mining House itself is a pretty large mining group in the country. We own quite a few mining assets of a large size. Probably the ones that most people know, Frederick Rebecca Gold Mine, Shamba Gold Mine, Bindura Nickel Corporation. We also have a management services company, which recently won the tender to manage Zisco Steel. We've got a lot of other mines as well that are of a smaller scale, but still within the group. And of late, we've been in the news for being the majority owners of Sandawana Mine in Berengwa.
Sorry, did you say of late?
We probably have been in the news a lot for various reasons, but I suppose in the last couple of months, that's probably what has made a lot of noise.
Well, welcome to the show.
very much.
It's an honor and a pleasure to have you. Can we call you a state apparatchik?
Close enough.
I suppose I should point out that firstly, I'm here in my personal capacity, not in Kubimba Mining House capacity.
Yeah, very important.
But having said that, Kubimba Mining House is majority owned by various entities that are controlled by the government. But it is a private company run on commercial basis. We are not we are not a state-owned organization.
So that would be a yes.
You may do whatever you want with that information. George.
Sam, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
besides that, you're such a great person because you spent 6 years in the same place as me.
Yeah. We lots has happened since then. So thank you. My name's Sam Hysak. I'm the managing director of Prospect Resources. We're a much smaller mining house. We're an Australian listed, so we're a public company actually. We listed on the ASX, and we've been focused on Zimbabwe for around 8 years. And globally, the lithium focus has sort of been building ahead of steam, and there's been a lot more energy in lithium, probably dating back to the first peak in the cycle in 2017. Really, there was some clear indication that lithium was an a mineral of scarcity, and so we started looking in Zim and drilled out, over time drilled out the Arcadia Lithium project in Koromonzi. So that's what I do. We have subsequent to drilling that out, we did all the feasibility work, and we're running a partnership process it's now 2 years ago, to bring in a minority funding partner. During that process, we developed a lot of suitors. We've done a lot of our work really academically smart. We'd done everything right. We'd done laid the foundation for the asset in a way that was very attractive to bigger, badder, integrated battery mineral players. So yeah, we ran a process. There were 7 to 10 players in the process. We ended up selling outright. We represented our minorities and carried them with us. So so Prospect sold the Arcadia asset, which was very pleasing for the shareholders, but in a way a bit disappointing for me. I'm an operator, so I was looking forward to bringing some of my skills back to some of my operational skills to Zim. So we're back to...
Sorry, we're all listening for a number here. You know that, right?
Yeah. So including the minorities on a 100% basis, 423 million US.
You guys sold a Zimbabwean mine for $400 million.
Yeah.
423.
Sorry.
Yeah, $23 million. It's not immaterial.
A lot of money.
It's important. And could you explain maybe how long did it take, the full cycle from the first time you started exploring to the time you sold it? How long was it?
So the exploration is usually quite quick. That took about 9 months, and it's as with exploration, you've got to follow the resource, and it had some complications that we had to discover and really think through. So after about 4 months, it was really disappointing actually, and after 9 months we'd really persevered, put a bit more capital at risk. So it took about a year to define the mineral resource, the maiden resource estimate, and then probably about 2 years after that to really get the feasibility done. So a lot of the things that we look at as a sort of from an operational mindset, to how are we going to bring this to life? And at that point, I think we were operating at about 700 US per ton for the final concentrate. Throughout last year or the year before, when we were doing the partnership process, we saw that rising to $5,000 a ton. So economics really were outstanding for the project. So that buries some of the complexities that these projects carry. Metallurgy.
I wonder.
Sorry, but it's not just a question.
Yep.
Because it's not just trying to get rich quick. From the day you guys thought, hey, it might be a good idea to buy this claim or whatever it was, to the day you or the shareholders got their 423 million.
Yeah, 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Okay. Is that typical?
Well, I would defend the COVID years as being quite difficult to create outcomes. We were all stuck in our countries, and I was in Australia, which was really stuck. I think you'd be happy with 4 years typically. Okay. In Australia, with the permitting process, probably expect that to be a bit longer. So 4 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Typically, mining projects of that size, in a lot of Western countries, you might go up to 10 years before you actually get all the permits you need to be able to sell that.
But it's more about the permits.
I guess even the whole process of exploration itself and then proving what you've got. I was going to ask, I know that I'm a guest, but I think it's drinks, right? So I can ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, George is not. Don't take George all that seriously.
It's
not.
Because I was.
What he writes on his WhatsApp.
He tries to bully us everywhere.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, Sam, if when you saw it $700 a ton, now and then you saw prices going up to $5,000 a ton, whether you started wondering if you had sold out a bit too early.
Yeah, well, $700 a ton was during the feasibility process. throughout that, should we say the partnership, we called it the partnership process. We were, up until a couple of days before we announced our transaction, we were, trying to raise $200 million on a 50% basis to partner. And I'll talk a bit about debt, because 4 years isn't a technical process, it's a development process. But up until 5 to midnight, we were we were running a process with competitors, and so they were all reflecting the actual commodity price, and the way we structured our engagements with them, I think, brought out a competitive outcome for us. So I also think the near-term commodity spikes have been great, but the turbulence in the commodity sector is actually a bit of an impediment, because people say, well, it went up pretty quickly, can it crash pretty quickly? Probably half the people I speak to are certain it will, although I don't think it will. Yeah. I think a bit of consistency is actually going to help bring the investment and the capital, because the capital, particularly debt, doesn't take risk. So if you're going to bring capital and you want to do it inexpensively, then it's debt, and in which case you've got to find a way for them to carry as little risk as possible.
Okay, we're going to come back to the investment environment, but can we delve a little bit into lithium, because while we were on the break, Tinashe and I and Rufaro, when he wasn't otherwise engaged, were involved in some pretty brutal Twitter battles on the issue of beneficiation. And I'm sure you guys, both have views on this, but before we get to your views, talk us through the lithium value chain. So what do we have in Zim? And what is there between what we have in Zim and a Tesla? Because Rufaro is here, or a Porsche, or wherever else lithium goes.
Sure. Before we do that, can we take off our jackets? Because
you don't need my permission to take off your jacket.
Are you deferring to George about your clothing? Seriously?
No, not about our clothing, but just
you may take off your jacket.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else who'd like to take off their jacket is welcome.
Thank you.
So maybe while Sam's doing that, would you like to have a bite of the chili?
Okay, I actually have a question for Simba.
Yes, ask for it.
No, wow.
Do you know what? If you ask that question, I can then determine which one is easier, and I'll go for that one.
I think mine is much more interesting than than George's. Because you brought up a question about commodity pricing, and I don't know whether it happened in the last 18 months, but there was a short squeeze on nickel on the London Metals Exchange, and I think
2021.
And I think it went all the way up to $100,000 a ton, which was crazy. And I think some people got carried out. Some short sellers there. Yeah. That's a massive short squeeze. But was anybody able to actually benefit from that price at 100,000? Because you guys sitting at Bindura would have been looking at that price go through the roof, thinking,
yes.
So you can see he clearly didn't read any of the pre-show briefing material. Right?
No, who reads and who
does. Yeah. Okay. I'll let Sam take the lithium process because he's an engineer as well. I'll happily take the nickel one because I'm an actuary. So look. Well, the short answer is that no one in the industry benefited from the spike to $100,000 because the London Metal Exchange reversed a lot of the transactions that happened at those prices, or at least they also stopped trading at around those prices. The other side of it is that there were some short sellers that had been squeezed quite significantly, so they benefited from the fact that the London Metal Exchange reversed a lot of that. So the market didn't win much. In fact, I would say that market economics didn't win, though of course the LME might have a completely different thing to say about that. But some players within the market, particularly some of the largest nickel producers in the world who had taken a certain position, which was causing that spike, benefited. It was a moment of irrationality in the market, as so often happens. So I can understand both sides of the aisle, really, to say, well, maybe some of those trades shouldn't have gone through, whereas others might say, well, a proper functioning market means that we should burn those that kind of take certain risks, if it comes to it. Yeah, we certainly benefited from the general trend in higher nickel prices than we did from that particular prices. Though I can tell you that we tried to hedge our prices at that price, but we were told by our partners that it was not possible.
Wow.
Yeah. Can we get back?
Sure.
I think
just in that particular instance.
Okay. Since everybody's talking about whatever they want to talk about, anyway.
All I wanted to point out is that the LME obviously gives some transparent, independent pricing. It's a trading platform, and lithium isn't actually it's not a listed commodity.
Is it even a metal?
It is a metal, yeah. It's right at the bottom of the periodic table.
You clearly did.
But importantly is yes, I did. Is with the LME, you've got this independent pricing. It's market driven, and so people can plan in accordance with that independence and that transparency. And I'll take a moment to explain the integrated lithium supply chain, and you'll understand exactly how exposed we are to sort of Southeast Asia, to China. So you asked a good question, Simba. You asked were we seeing the rise in commodity price, and did it give us the jitters? So long-term contracting offtake agreements is really the sort of modus operandi for lithium. So there's no spot price for it. There kind of is, but there's no open market for it. There's a couple of auction systems that could grow into a sales platform for lithium, but it's pretty much almost all the investments into lithium developments come from upstream or downstream rather. They've said, look, we need the physicals, and let's.
So the battery manufacturers or the car manufacturers are the ones that invest.
Yeah. So if you have a look at CATL, and there's a whole bunch of them. I shouldn't attempt to name them, but Southeast Asia, South Korea, and China basically have put a lot of effort and investment into production. They own cornerstone stakes in all the major lithium production in Australia, limited to under 10%. By the FIRB, Foreign Investment Review Board, mostly because of the geopolitics and the tension. But what those offtake partners will do is they'll bring you funding because they want the physicals. And up until about 4 years ago, a classic lithium process was we mine it, we try and upgrade it from around 1% as a cutoff, probably sits in your resources around 1%, and you try to get that to 6% for spodumene, which is one of the classic minerals with lithium, and then you're sort of shipping a whole bunch of nothing with that to China, where it's going into a chemical plant. And that's generally lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide, and these plants generally use high pressure, high temperature acid leach as it's a metal, to leach out the lithium from the mineral. And in Zim, we have pegmatites, which, if you're not careful, look a lot like granites and a lot like some of the other host minerals we see here. It's white, pink, sometimes purple for lepidolite. So in its natural form, you'd be forgiven for mistaking it for aggregate or for other industrial minerals. It doesn't look like a copper concentrate or a nickel concentrate. It's a concentrate, but what it is, it's a concentrated mineral. Then needs to get crushed, liberated, and it's at that point that you try to leach out metals. So in China, they're taking...
Sorry, so I'm just going to come in here. and say what I've understood so far for the benefit of the simple man. So we've got this stuff in rocks, and it looks like any other rock to the average man. And you've got to crush it and do something with it here so that it goes from that rock only having 1% of it, of the good stuff, to about 6%. Then we send it off to China, and they put in a big kettle, and add some acid in it, and then the really, really good stuff comes out at the bottom.
Yeah, so what comes out then is a lithium carbonate or hydroxide. They're in the 99.9% category. A little bit different, I'm generalizing.
Not bad for someone.
Yeah, you did well. The kettle bit
You
was...
definitely got it. Yeah, it's interesting. You should say that there are some rocks with lithium that really look like aggregate, because I do have an anecdote on that, which is quite interesting. So our mine at Sandawana, before that, they used to mine for emeralds, as most people know, and therefore they didn't really care about the lithium. So there's a whole big dump there that they just dump a lot of their waste. And when we were starting to go there, because people really didn't know what they had, they would take some of that dump and actually lay the road. So I joke to people that we probably have the most expensive road part of that, because they were just using it as aggregate for real, as opposed to actually.
Are you trying to tell me that if I go and
I haven't said which road though.
It's a good road base.
Yeah, it is a very good.
Especially if you think it's valueless.
Yeah.
We don't want Tinashe digging up your road.
Anyway, let's get back to the lithium story. So now you've got 94% stuff that's come out of my kettle. It's probably a better word for it, name for it than kettle.
Yeah, that's okay. Microwave kettle.
So you got this 90 or 94% stuff. What happens to it?
Yeah, so that if it's sort of 99.99, they recognize that as what they call a battery precursor. It's now that you start to talk about batteries.
Okay.
I probably would also like to explain that a mining business, opening a mine to ship just ore, I don't know, maybe $5 or $10 million to remove overburden, set up your stockpiles, to set up processing plant. In our case, it was around $190 million at Arcadia. To set up, and this is important to know from the beginning, to set up the chemical plant to then handle that, that's about $600 to $800 million. And about 200 megawatts. Okay, so that's
you need electricity.
Yeah.
Yes.
So a bit more than we're producing on some bad days at the moment.
Just it's worth hanging on to the importance of integration.
Yeah.
And so when we were doing our feasibility, we could easily have found offtake partners who would take 5, maybe 4% concentrated product. So if you know your metallurgy, you can get more recovery if you drop your grade. There's a grade recovery curve. We were stuck with plus 6% because you really don't want to be shipping twice the volumes that you need to. But when the commodity price more than doubles, pretty much anything works. So there's been a lot of
maybe
elasticity.
because that's interesting. That's from an economic perspective. That's interesting. So the 6% is a result of just the pricing at that particular time in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
If the pricing gets higher, then 1% becomes very viable.
Yeah. So 6% when I was doing my feasibility was sort of $700 US dollars a ton.
So that's the relationship.
And I think 1% products are selling for $700 today.
Yeah.
So and remember, I reminded you, we take 1% out the mine. So your Sandawana mine dumps are probably selling, or could find a market for 500.
Yeah. Agreed.
You know better.
Yeah. Precisely. I think just to kind of correct slightly on the 1% or 6%. Basically, there is a market for 0.5%, depending on what the person that's the off-taker that's taking the material wants to do with it. 6% tends to be talked about a lot because it actually then starts to be the input into carbonate plants. So that's why it kind of looks like a magic number. It also kind of works from an economics perspective as well. So even if somebody does take it 4.5%, they may still go up and concentrate it up to 6% and then put it into a plant. but certainly there are certain grades that make sense at certain prices. It's not unlike gold even. I always say to people, there's always this worry about us running out of resources, and really running out of resources is really a function of price and technology more than it is of the actual metal on the ground. Because 500 years ago, no one would have touched gold that was less than 50 grams a ton. It was not worth their time.
Now people are doing what, 4 grams a ton?
No one has 50 grams a ton of gold anyway. So, and yet we still have gold mines. In fact, we are probably producing more nowadays than then. So really, the price can support. It's really
down to economics
and technology.
So I'll just quickly interrupt. The crew's trying to signal a break, but I think we'll just carry on and merge the first 2 segments because the discussion is really good. So carry on.
Because you're bringing in technology, but then technology is a function of the economics. If the price is high, the technology will.
Look, ultimately, the viability of any business is economics.
Okay.
Right. So, therefore, the price, which is an essential part of the economics of a mine.
Okay. I suppose, and let me, because you're the expert, so you need to articulate it better. Because when we articulate it, then people think we've got an agenda.
People think Tinashe is
Yeah.
not we.
Maybe that was the royal we there. Yeah.
You're we.
Stop hiding behind me.
Because there are those who believe that this is a finite resource. So I just want to go back to your, whether it's a finite or not, it's actually determined by economics. There are those who believe that these are national assets.
Correct.
And it's a finite resource. And therefore, we should get the most out of it. And you seem to be saying that actually that doesn't matter. What really matters is the economics. So you could have a finite resource, as we did 500 years ago, gold, but the price then determined whether or not we actually mine.
Well,
Whereas,
I would like.
Sorry, before you come in, and if I may come in, and Sam is saying, as much as you like the idea of selling batteries, have you got $1.5 billion to set up everything from a mine to a battery plant?
Yes.
Have you got the $1.5 billion today to even have that discussion?
Yeah.
And the electricity.
Yeah.
And the
Before I probably get misquoted.
That's okay. We get misquoted all the time.
Yeah.
There's definitely. Well, I would have accepted it if I was drinking. Then I would probably have said I was drinking. But I am not. So, look, I think what I was saying was finiteness is infinity. Thank you. Is a function of present economics.
Okay.
Right. So actually, you can have a finite resource because present economics don't support it. Right? It's no use to tell a 40-year-old guy 500 years ago that don't worry, the resource is infinite, when he cannot actually make economic sense of it at that time.
Okay.
Right.
But I think the point Tinashe is making is in the context of the debate that is out there at the moment.
Yeah.
Of do we insist on beneficiation?
No, before we even get there. And I think he's on the right path.
Yeah.
It's before we even have that discussion. Does it matter that this thing is finite or
yes.
So first of all, that's the first argument.
Yes.
Let me give you a good example
So
based on our actual mine, which on Sandawana.
It's helpful to have actual example.
Yeah, I have an actual
know
example.
what they're talking about.
So
Yeah.
after you guys have had paved the road with
Yeah.
Carry on.
When Sandawana mine was discovered, initially the initial samples were taken to London for sampling back then, in the 50s or 40s, I think. And what they were looking for was actually lithium, believe it or not. That's what they sent the initial samples for. And based on all the geology and everything that was happening, the report that came back said, why are you bothering yourselves with lithium? There are emeralds there.
That's an important.
Right?
Yeah,
so
segue.
at that time, it didn't make much sense to
The economics.
The economics of lithium didn't support a good mine. The economics of emeralds,
time,
however, did.
At that time, it was pretty much only used for glass, right?
Yeah, and medical
doesn't
use,
matter.
but very little.
No, but that's the point.
No, the point is, it doesn't matter. What matters is it's the economics, it's the price.
Yes, but
Whether this resource...
But that's the point, though. That at the time,
Yes.
it was of low value because.
Well, you guys are saying the same thing. You are saying economics, which is a function of demand and supply. You are talking about the demand. So I think you are saying the same
you should
thing.
come more often.
But the point is, at that time, it was an emerald mine because the economics supported emeralds. But we know that Sandawana actually shut down because the economics of emeralds at some point stopped working. And it was not a functioning mine for the last 10 years. And now we're talking about it being potentially the largest lithium resource in the country.
Really?
And now that matters more because the economics now support lithium resource.
So actually, lithium classically wasn't a battery. The end user wasn't the battery. It's used predominantly in the industrial sector for glazes and all sorts of household goods.
Yeah.
It has a strange utilization in Pyrex dishes. You know, it goes from minus 15 to plus 100 and doesn't crack. That's generally because it's made with a lithium product, which has a almost zero coefficient of expansion, which is the same as energy density. As batteries have come along, people have used it for its same
properties.
Yeah, properties, chemical properties, but different applications. So at Arcadia, it was actually drilled in the early 80s for lithium, and they had a reasonable attempt at it. They didn't follow the sort of resource the way we did, and they declared it complicated, and that legacy has followed the asset. But it was complicated because in the 80s, if you had high-grade spodumene, but it had, trace elements of iron, no one in the industrial sector would touch it because it gave you a brown stain on any of your products that you used it on. So they looked at it, and we've read all the reports. Complicated, economics weren't there, demand wasn't there, left it, and so. Now that's the sort of information that our business goes through now.
Yeah.
We go through people's drill reports. They're drilling for gold. They found lithium. They found pegmatites in the 60s and the 40s. Back then, it was as bad as finding quartz or granite. They sort of said, "This it's not gold.
Exactly.
Let's leave." So,
So maybe moving on just a little bit. So lithium is this big thing. There's this discussion on do we beneficiate, do we not? And Sam is saying, well, if you're going to have that discussion, think about all the other things. Well, you're not saying it, but I'm picking up from what Sam is saying. Think about all these things around the capital required and the energy required. But let's go back to the beginning of your story, Sam. So you guys show up. You put in, from the numbers I was doing in my head, around $200 million over 4 years.
yeah, 45 actually into the country.
You put in 45 million.
Yeah, 45
over 4 years.
Yeah.
And then you walk away with 423. So I'm seeing you multiplying your money by almost 10 times in 4 years. Why don't we have more stories like this?
That's a good question. Exploration.
Yes.
Why is there not much
you're suggesting an answer.
exploration?
Why don't I mean we've he's sitting on a lot of mines. Why aren't his mines going down the same story?
Okay. Well, I guess from our perspective, we have completely different objectives to a foreign investor that might come into the country, look to do some exploration, develop a mine, and then what do they want to do after that? They want their return, take their money. Well, Sam is still here, so I'm assuming some of that money is staying in this country. But the general...
All of Sam's money is in this country. I mean, what are you suggesting?
It's all on me, right?
Well, yeah. But
new shoes.
The point I'm making is I think initially objectives are quite different. So therefore, you may not necessarily hear the same success stories being talked about in terms of converting the value of something to something else. When we took over Frederick Becker, for example, I think it was doing just under 40 kilograms of gold at that time because it had gone down. We improved that significantly, and at some point we're doing up to 250 kilograms per month of gold, which is a lot of money. But we are not we're not taking that money outside. We're not trying to sell, so we don't actually arrive at a price discovery mechanism for that.
What George is trying to say is it not a good idea? Because we've got so much of this resource in this country. Is it not a good idea to sell if Frederick Becker now makes money, or whoever sell, get as much money as you can,
and build 10
feeders,
or not,
because you still need capital,
or not sell and actually use the money from Freda to build 10 more Fredas, which is what we are doing.
The quicker way is to sell Frida and get.
That's why I said the objectives now are different.
I spent 14 years with First Quantum Minerals. They never sold anything.
But they could raise.
What they did in those 4 years that I talked to you earlier about discovery to operations, they did in 2 years because their balance sheet funded everything.
Yeah,
they didn't have to go to the bank. The bank just gave them a rotating facility, top company guarantee, and $2 billion. Zambia, boom, done. Building teams, construction there 3 weeks later.
So why don't they come and do that here?
Well, it's all about risk and risk tolerance and what your shareholders want. First Quantum dropped more than $1 billion in Congo. They lost their assets, and so they're pretty ambitious, but they're also they found a sweet spot. And to your point, a strong balance sheet can really be a lot more attractive.
So how come you guys were able to raise money? So you guys were able to raise money.
They didn't raise money. They
we did.
So
we raised.
First they raised the 45 to do
All right.
Yeah.
And then they.
But when did you raise that 45? I think that's where the answer is.
Well, we've raised it to fund our activities, so we've had to scrape it together, literally.
But how come you were able to attract money to do this?
Because
and others can't.
Yeah, but the assumption is others can't. In reality, not everybody can at the moment, particularly in Zimbabwe. We do have to accept the perceived risk in Zimbabwe that is out there, and it takes a certain level of good analysis to actually say, you know what, I think the risk is worth taking in Zimbabwe. The truth is, out there, people don't always go beyond the first stage of there's a risk map. Which countries are in red? We're not touching them as a first stage before they go to the second stage of, okay, let's look at what's there and let us invest. But I do also think that the other thing is it's a function of the things that the world needs. And something like lithium, which is at that stage where really the world is looking at where do they get their battery minerals from, is something that even we are seeing a lot of investors knocking on our door to have a discussion about whether they can invest in the country or not. Which then boils down to the objectives I was saying that, well, what is our objective when we look at the assets we've got and what we want to do with it? So even when we look at lithium, we've been offered $200-300 million of money to develop that asset from external investors. Then we are asking ourselves, if we are majority controlled by government and we were built to build assets for the country, would we actually be doing the country a service if we sold out at this stage? Or maybe we actually develop, where they put in $40 million from investors to develop their mine to a certain stage. We are putting in a lot of that money from our shareholders, roughly the same amounts actually, funny enough, is coming from internal sources of capital in order for us to get those assets to a certain stage. So our objectives may be very different as well.
But okay, I hear you speaking as Kuvimba, but looking at it as a country, are we better off going down this road, bearing in mind that 15 years ago, we missed out on a commodity cycle? Around 2008?
Yeah,
true. There was a boom.
Earlier than 2000.
We missed out on a cycle because our mines had no investment. We're in a boom now.
Remember,
we're missing out on a cycle.
There was the controversial indigenization law in the
Yeah.
same year,
Yes,
which really it was a clear international signal that we
don't
won't
come.
open. Yeah, and that's all changed now.
Correct.
But today we're missing out on another boom. I mean, you talked about how much First Quantum has put into Zambia. We've heard the numbers that Barrick has put into Tanzania. I mean, these are all 9, 10 figure, 10 digit amounts. And the biggest number we've heard come in here is your 423, and it didn't really come here.
It didn't come here.
What do you mean it didn't come here?
Well, hold on.
The shareholders
it
are not
did.
Zimbabwean.
What it's
Somewhat,
done though is it's enabled that operation to go ahead. It's 2,000 people employed there. If they do go downstream, which they have the best skills because they've come upstream.
Yeah.
They're a precursor manufacturer. They run the chemical plants I was telling you about. They've got tired of relying on miners to supply them concentrates. They've said, I'm going to put my hand on what we need, and they've chased it. So, they're bringing that investment. They've spent $300 million in the last year.
I mean, I hear you, Sam, but I mean, let's be frank here, right? So here we're trying to have a discussion and trying to sort of eke out how the country's benefited from this 423. But most of the money went to shareholders listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Whereas Zambia
Money's coming in.
They've received cash, they've received equipment.
The same can be said for dividends out of Zambia. Where do they go? They leave the country. What I think is easier to focus on rather than merging investor outcomes and needs as well as business outcome and needs is to see development. You talk about Zim as having all the minerals that it needs. What you want to see is a long list of A-grade investors, miners, with their investors behind them, knocking on Zim's door saying, this is a region of choice.
So what do we need to do to get that A-grade investor?
Yeah, there's reparations in the international community. We experience a perception reality gap. What we see on the ground versus what people think is happening on the ground has to be described in every meeting I go to. Yeah. It's that there's quite a big gap. The perception is far worse, in our opinion. We like operating here. So, a bit of transparency. I think policy stability. Those are the things I'd like to see.
Policy stability. Have you heard those words, someone?
Yeah, I think so. But I've got a question for you guys, because you're saying it's a perception, but there's the other reality that if you go to Zambia, 40% of your earnings are not being taken at a discount of 41%.
Correct.
And then after 120 days, I believe, 25% of your money is being taken by the Reserve Bank. Not that it's a problem, them taking the money, let's push that aside. But the fact that they're taking it at a heavy discount, and you're looking at an A-grade miner, and they see that's not perception, that's reality.
Yes.
How do you reconcile that?
Well, it is definitely one of the factors that affect the ability of Zimbabwe to attract investment. The reality is when somebody is outside the country and they are looking to invest, as you would if you were looking to invest anywhere in Zimbabwe and outside, the first question is, how do I get my money in? What will my money do? And how do I get my money out? Right? This is capital goes where it can come back, right? As far as we're concerned. So the inability of international investors to be able to get their monies out in a seamless way is probably the bigger problem here. As you rightly pointed out, the fact that 40% of your money is liquidated in of itself is not a problem. The problem is that it is a discount to the costs that you face, because they are necessarily pegged to a certain level that is different from what your money is being discounted, is being liquidated at. If it was a one-to-one discount, you wouldn't feel it. It would make no difference to you. And then the other way now is when it then gets liquidated, can you then now take that money, take it back in the same direction so you can pay your dividends outside the country, which is a challenge for a lot of investors. That's the truth. Okay. So that doesn't do us good in terms of being able to attract investors, because foreign investors don't come here because they
love the weather.
They love the weather only, right?
Really?
Yeah, it's a nice to have. It's a nice to have, but you know, they would happily come here with $1,000 and stay at a lodge and enjoy the weather. They don't put $40 million for the weather.
The word lodge.
at a 5-star hotel somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so and Siba can say some things that Sam can say. The 40% is a problem.
Correct.
Energy. Can we grow the mining sector with our current generation infrastructure and our current transmission infrastructure? Are you guys considering serious investments at the moment? And how are you looking at the energy situation?
Well, firstly, the answer to can we grow the mining sector with the current energy situation we have in the country, if we are reliant on the existing energy infrastructure, the answer is no. Right? There is no
sugarcoating
it.
Doubt. Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Everybody knows that. The policymakers know that. And also, there is a greater cost to that because all the conversations we have. So we, apart from obviously what we're trying to do in lithium, we also have a lot of other projects that are happening. We've got Zimbabwe Alloys, which of course requires quite a bit of energy. And this country has the ability to produce a lot of different metals at different stages. Without energy, all of that is really a pipe dream. And a lot of the questions we face from potential investors who might want to come in and partner with us because they do see us as a very attractive destination for investment. A lot of them, they ask, what about your energy problem?
And how do you answer?
Well, so as a company, we've decided that apart from obviously encouraging and whispering into the ears of those that do make decisions in terms of which direction to take, as you can as an ordinary citizen too, we are also investing in our own energy generating systems so that we can provide the energy that we need. It just therefore becomes an extra cost of investment. And the truth is, regardless of how much investment we put in as a company, we cannot put in enough for all the energy needs that we have. But for example, at Bindura Nickel Corporation, we are about to start building a 30 megawatt solar plant to try and help alleviate that problem. But it's not just as I saw from an earlier episode that you did, it is not just a generation problem. It's also a transmission problem and a distribution problem. So some of those things, there's not a lot we can do if because there's certain national infrastructure that must be taken care of at national level. Otherwise, it becomes uneconomic.
Just out of interest, if you put in the 30 megs in Bindura, will that be able to run the plant? Will you be able to smelt nickel?
We should be able to get to an acceptable capacity. It is scalable to 45 megawatts.
Okay.
So but you need batteries with that.
Yes. Thankfully, we also have a lithium mine, if you've heard. So I think we'll be able. No, I mean, jokes aside. Of course, we will also need forms of storage.
Yeah.
But when individuals try to come up with a solution that should probably be at national level, it is really never the most efficient way of doing anything, right?
Miners should just be miners.
Yeah, correct. And so even when we generate power that way, we would actually rely more on the national grid, because if we can generate more power than we need, we can put it onto the national grid. And that means we need less energy from some of our existing sources. So that's already a form of storage for us. If during the day we don't need a lot of energy from Kariba, we're effectively using Kariba Dam as a source of energy storage, right? So you still need the infrastructure to work.
Okay. Yeah, and George, my role with First Quantum finished with me building a 300 megawatt power station in Panama.
Really?
Because Panama's national grid was 900 megawatts, and they needed 300. In fact, just in milling, we had 200 megawatts of demand.
Well, Panama is a small little.
It's a little peninsula. And that added, with the port and all the coal handling, that added more than $1.5 billion to the capital cost of that project.
So why didn't you guys come and do that here?
Well, that was a $7 billion project, and I think you know what Simba struck on really early is really worth reflecting on. Is it's all about economics. So why aren't we seeing everyone here? Well, the cost of capital is extremely high here, which reflects risks which are not structural infrastructure risks. They're policy and financial and things that are way smarter people understand. You guys know that better than me. But when you think about a project, you've got to look at, can that project support its own power generation?
Yeah.
I'm going to put $192 million at Arcadia, but I might need to put 60 to 80 into a power plant. And then that OPEX, I must reflect the diesel burn. I can do all that. You know, in some countries you can't. But the next question, which all our Tesla owners are asking, is how did you produce that lithium? How did you produce it? Did you burn fossil fuels to make me a green car? There's a bit of irony there. So actually, a lot of the debt available for green energy policy, of which there's a lot of money floating around, they're only going to chase it if you can be certain, demonstrate empirically that you're going to use hydro or renewable energy. So actually, Zim's got its sources of resources of lithium, its reserves, but converting them is going to be quite hard. Not only because of our general issues for which you're commenting on, but also because downstream customers after 2030 probably won't take lithium that's got any fossil or CO2 loading on it.
So basically, you guys are in agreement. We've got to sort out the energy.
Absolutely.
At a national level.
Yes.
And Sam is saying,
That's not what I'm getting. What I'm getting is, you've got a country like Panama that, and what he's also saying is, we're quite happy to invest in energy. We're quite happy to do all these things, but that's more capital in. And for us to put in more capital, then there must be some sort of stability. There must be some sort of...
You have to reduce the risk.
You have to reduce the risk.
The project must also handle it.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, economics drive everything. If you're burning diesel to make pizzas, pizzas will be more expensive.
Correct.
Don't look at me.
I'm only signaling that you can solve these things. But 10 years ago, you put a diesel plant on most of these assets, and right now, our Tesla owners, our future green economy, is looking down their nose at that sort of reaction. They want to know sourcing. Is it responsibly sourced? Has it been sourced without high cost?
There's this video that's been doing the rounds from the DRC, looking at Tesla. Because Tesla used to get its cobalt from the DRC.
Correct.
And these videos have been doing the rounds, and at investor conferences, the Tesla guys were being asked if they're sourcing their cobalt from the DRC. And I think as of November,
they've taken DRC completely out of the supply chain.
Or cobalt, they've taken cobalt out of the supply chain altogether. So ESG is a serious matter.
Keep an eye on Rwanda's spike.
Yes, correct.
It's imminent.
It's
interesting.
So the policy risk, I think, it's not so much the 40% retention or the 41 or 42% discount. What it is that you actually don't know what the retention is going to be in 6 months or next year, and you don't know whether because inflation in this part of the world is unpredictable. So the discount that today is 42%. If you're using a power market rate of 1,000, it might be 50% in 6 months. It might be 90%.
It's gone to 90%.
It might, So, and if you're making these investments, if you're thinking about processing lithium and building the energy infrastructure to power the processing plant, and you're looking at an investment horizon of 15 years, but you don't know what the policy is going to be in 6 months.
Naturally, and I think Sam mentioned it earlier, that policy stability is also a very important aspect of a decision, of something that a decision maker has to take into account. A lot of this capital, particularly based on Tinashe's question earlier, you can go up to 10 years with your money basically invested in a particular project before you can get it out, right? So we are necessarily playing a long-term game, and the last thing you want is, uncertainty at that level, especially uncertainty that can completely change the economics of your investment. Right? Overnight, your net present value of your investment can change purely based on policy, as opposed to just the underlying operational risks that, by the way, you still face as you actually invest in that project anyway. So this is just additional risk, as opposed to the normal risk that you're probably more able to take.
So the risk that you're going to make a mistake on digging a hole to get lithium out is the same whether whether you're digging a hole in Zim or in Australia.
Correct.
But if Australia doesn't every once in a while wake up and make a rule that you can't export your lithium.
So now we have policy risk too. That's in it. I mean, it exists in Australia, but perhaps less so.
They don't have a track record of doing this.
So Simba, interestingly, you've touched on a big issue we faced during our sale. When I had $750 per metric ton as a commodity, that was the floor price that we expected. We had to think very carefully about. It's always about risk, actually. Yeah. So you said, hey, how did you feel when it went to $5,000 a ton? Well, what did we feel? We knew that our shareholders, there's a difference between risk appetite and risk tolerance. Our shareholders have risk appetite. Why are they investing in Zim? Why am I here? I have risk appetite. But we actually all have a risk tolerance. I'm going to drive on a bad road, which is risky, but I'm going to have a big car. I don't have tolerance.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy a Fit. That's my mitigation. So we knew, hey, we can handle, and our investors can handle Zim. But they can't handle much more after that. So when we started looking at mining, it saturated what we believed was our risk tolerance. And while they have risk appetite, they were like, but it's going to be all right, isn't it? That's risk tolerance. Now we're saying, how much can they take? So when we were looking at our mining, we couldn't be ambitious and go, well, the strip ratio is 3 to 1, but if we work hard, we'll get it down to 2.5. We had to take it to 3.5. So that the diligence of our partners go, so there's no risk there. Limited additional risk. We've got almost all the risk our investors could absorb was by being here. And that's a genuine position. So all our metallurgical assumptions had to be almost risk-free, and therefore you can't take blue sky. You have to say, well, if we grab it as operators, we'll grab it. But as a selling entity, we unfortunately took cash in lieu of risk.
Correct.
And not everyone. What I would like to say is it's a green shoot. I mean, it's drawn attention to the possibilities.
Absolutely.
And what Zim has is good skills. Possibly not specific to lithium, but eventually, possibly, will develop. So
Sam, before I just want to move away a little bit from this investment and risk, and just before we go to the break, I want to come back to the lithium value chain, right? So I've got two questions, and maybe you can take the first one, and Simba, you can think about the second one. From what I've been reading, I understand there's two kinds of lithium ore.
At least.
Okay. So there you go. So you got a long answer coming up.
Okay.
There's ore that is easy to process. There's ore that is hard to process.
Yeah.
And where are we? Who else has got ore like ours? And what's their attitude towards mining it, processing it, etc.?
Yeah, that's quite a good question. For a non-mining audience, all mining is actually complicated. We should accept that at the beginning. So whether you've got 3 steps or 5 steps in your beneficiation, it's not one step. in Australia, there are actually operations called DSO. It's called direct ship ore, and it's iron ore. Ship it, sort of dust it off, and spray it, and it goes to Southeast Asia.
Yes.
So Australia's got a long history of exporting unprocessed natural ore, and it's a big country. It's got
So for the layman, it's a rock.
It's a rock.
They just
Yeah, not any
rock.
rock though. It's a pretty
Okay.
cool rock.
Yeah.
It's valuable rock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
valuable rock.
so-
but
and
it's
Australia's
a
a
commodity.
commodity.
It's
It's a commodity.
How do they quantify? So, for example, tax, royalties, if you're just exporting a rock, because I think policymakers have that problem that they don't understand. So if
Yeah.
it's a rock, then how do I get my royalty? How do I get
Yeah.
my tax?
It's a question of what's a finished product. If you can ship cathode plate to London Metals Exchange, it's basically a market commodity. It's a finished product. You can further beneficiate it. You can make it electrical cable. That's another process, or whatever. But it's a terminal market. We call it a terminal market. You can sell it, someone will buy it. Lithium's not a terminal market. It's an integrated value chain. And I'm probably, in my description of chemistry to carbonate, I'm about a third of the way to a Tesla battery.
Mhm.
Yeah, because then there's all sorts of other little things that start to happen. So we sold our asset for $400 million, but that's a $4 billion industry, but it's an intellectual property industry. It's about making batteries with and without cobalt. High discharge batteries, high yield batteries, low yield batteries, etc. There's a whole sector of battery knowledge that China's been, I suppose they've been investing into it since the 90s. So,
Wow.
so then you say, okay, well, we're not going to make batteries. What about the step before that? And you won't take long to get back to
Maybe we just dig it
They're
up.
just taking
shipping
it.
it as a concentrate. It's not an
That's
impractical
correct. Yeah.
departure for them. You know, you're not going to have people in white coats in a chemical plant soon.
Not for
Okay, we
Right.
produced lithium carbonate
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
in Chigutu.
Ah,
We produced 400 kgs.
Okay.
It was a proof of concept,
Yeah.
and it wasn't economic, but we did it.
We beneficiated.
The reality is we wanted to demonstrate
Yeah.
difficulty. It
Correct.
was $1 million exercise
Yeah.
to build that plant, to produce that, to illustrate to our regulators how unscalable that is right now. Yeah, we had to do that.
And I think an important, just to add to that, an important point with regards to beneficiation is that there's no, beneficiation should never really be a blanket term, right? It's very easy for us to get gold to 99.9% purity. It's not that hard. It's a lot harder to get to lithium carbonate, even in terms of the skill set required, the investment required. It's not the same process. It doesn't take the same amount of time. So there is an argument to say certain things must be beneficiated. Then there's an argument to say certain things must be upgraded to a certain point. And then after that, it is actually now beyond us to be able to do within a short enough period for us to benefit from the commodity.
So I have a question for you there, because I think it's an interesting philosophical question to say. While I agree with what you said 100%, right? The question is, who makes that call, right? Is it a senior government official sitting in an air-conditioned office, you know?
I don't think they're economic.
With looking at a Bloomberg terminal and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
I'm being facetious. I'm being facetious. But yeah, you know, and then they decide, okay, it makes sense to beneficiate this mineral to this point, so the rules and regulations around that mineral are going to be the following. That particular mineral doesn't make sense. We can just export it as ore. Therefore, the rules and regulations are going to be the following. Is it should such an office exist making those decisions, or should we just let the market decide? Right? If there's value in making the investment here to process ore to a certain level, some entrepreneur is going to figure it out, raise the money, and do it. And if they're wrong, they make the losses are for their account. If they write, more power to them, fantastic. And the market decides. And as far as the state is concerned, it's open.
Yeah.
So before you come in the next few minutes, we're going to be opening up for audience questions. So please, if you're on YouTube, please start typing your questions on YouTube. If you're on Twitter, please indicate by raising your hand. And Tinashe here will do some magic and tell us who's going to speak.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think the answer is a blend, right? There's a reason why there are policymakers that exist outside of just a market. We are not a pure market economy, and I don't think anyone has quite made it work 100%. There is indeed a need for policymakers to try and drive the nation towards a particular direction that its citizenry says, look, this is where we want to go with it. The answer is we do have a department, or we have a ministry that ought to make those decisions. And it ought to be skilled enough to make that decision, taking into account input from all over the place. So we do have the mechanism for it. Whether it's working or not, perhaps may be the basis of your question. But there is a ministry that actually sits somewhere and decides what should be beneficiated, what shouldn't, and what should be sold.
There's the Lithium Producers Association for consultation.
Can I tell you one industry in which we've attempted to do this is agriculture. And we haven't gone nearly as far, but we've attempted to decide for people at what price they should sell their unbeneficiated maize and at what price the people that will beneficiate maize into maize meal should buy it.
Yes.
How well has that gone?
Well, so you are talking of two different things. You are talking of pricing control as opposed to a policy that says you cannot, for example, sell unbeneficiated maize and let the market decide what beneficiated maize, what the price for beneficiated maize is.
But the pricing control is only the mechanism to achieve the policy, isn't it?
Well, it is a mechanism, but what they have done is, I think there are two different things, right? There is a policy that wants to be achieved. How you then approach it may give you completely different results, even though you're trying to reach a certain.
Okay, I'll go inside your company.
Yeah.
And you're busy. I won't use the word reconstructing, but you're busy rebuilding an asset called Zimbabwe.
Yes.
That recently went through a similar cycle of determining what should be beneficiated and what shouldn't, and we went the whole cycle. I don't even know. We said yes, then we said no, then we said yes. I don't even know whether it's a yes or a no at the moment. And how well did that work for Chrome?
I'm sure mistakes were made.
You're a state apparatchik. Anyway, let's move on. So, talking about that, we'll just stick with batteries for a while longer. I've been reading, and
Harry's book.
He's been reading Harry's book.
Hi, Harry.
And it turns out that by volume, lithium is not a great component of a lithium-ion battery. There's a few other metals in there that we happen to have. Graphite, which is a big chunk. Copper, iron, and nickel that he sits on tons of. And is also, I don't know if abundant is the right word, but is also available in this country in fairly large quantities. Why the song and dance about lithium? And are we not missing the rest of the opportunity? Are we missing the wood for the trees?
It's the forest for the trees.
Well, I think I'll let you take that because
I mean, the lithium industry, global lithium industry, last year was $4 billion. And the nickel industry, how big is that? How big is Xinshan? Xinshan bigger than Xinshan's a $50 billion.
It's bigger than some countries, that's for sure. It's the largest.
Some 50 billion?
Lithium's coming from a low base and it's multiplying.
Yeah.
In fact, demand for lithium will double, twice more before 2030. So those are the sort of things that create sensation.
It's the fastest growing.
That's the volatility.
It may not even be the fastest growing, but what it is I think as Seb is saying, we're talking about it because it is entering a very high growth phase. So at the moment, everybody is talking about this thing because there's also a lot of irrationality associated with it, right? It's not, it won't last for a long time. It will stabilize, that's for sure. Everybody will then know roughly how much lithium is required, and there will also be other competitors to lithium. So you may find that when you go to buy a battery for your solar system, you may very well decide whether you want a lithium-ion battery or something else, and because we'll get to a point where it will stabilize. It may not necessarily be replaced completely. Just like, we use copper in some cases where we can use aluminium and things like that.
I have a theory on why lithium is actually, why everybody, especially in Zimbabwe, is interested in lithium.
Because they took lithium pills.
That's true. But there's, it might be anecdotal, but there's a bit of data that supports my theory.
So what thing you learn about?
Either it's anecdotal
when anybody else
based on
uses
data.
an anecdote, it's unacceptable.
It's an anecdote, but backed by data.
Yeah.
And gold production in the last quarter of last year, 2022, actually went down, especially with the small scale producers. It's because all of them
don't say gold production, but say what Fidelity received.
Actual gold production receipts actually went down, and primarily because policy didn't change, and gold prices for the last quarter actually went up by about 2%. But the real reason why gold production actually went down is the small scale producers, Makorokoza, the artisanal miners, moved from gold to lithium.
To Sandawana.
Yes.
To Sandawana.
Specifically.
Well, Goromonzi as well. Goromonzi.
Sandawana, fortunately, was just already in a pile. Whereas in Goromonzi, you must come with your hammer and your other things.
Oh, all right. Okay, so there's that. But what it tells me, and that's why
Why didn't you guys tell me this last year?
Although it's an anecdote, but what it tells me is the excitement in Zimbabwe specifically, whereas elsewhere in the world there's not that much excitement, is that there's a lot more lithium here, and it's readily available. That's the feeling I get. You're getting Mutoko as well, around Murewa, Mutoko.
Look, there's a lot of excitement about lithium around the world.
I think that's important.
Yeah. There's a lot of excitement around lithium around the world generally.
Okay.
And this is what has caused prices to go up, and then Makorokozas here now find them that it's actually more profitable than gold.
Yeah.
Right? As Sam has rightly pointed out, you went to Sandawana, you picked up a rock, you gathered your rocks, you had 1 ton, somebody was willing to come in and pay for it. With gold, you might spend a week and not actually get a gram, right? So there was definitely that happened. But look, I also don't want to knock artisanal miners in this case, because I have to be careful. They were at Sandawana, which is one of our mines.
In fairness, you guys were paving roads with the stuff before.
But I think that ultimately we are discovering lithium deposits in the country, and we are discovering them to a large scale, which is what's important, right? We have to discover them to a large scale. If there's so much lithium, if all the lithium we had in the country was to run out because Makorokozas got at them, then we didn't have enough lithium, right?
Thank you.
Because we ought to be thinking much larger scale than that. And our grades that we are willing to put into plants are a lot lower than what a Makorokoza would probably be willing to kind of play with. So at some point it will stabilize, where then the large scale miners, operators are probably the only ones on the table. Because we mustn't forget that outside of this exuberance, lithium is still a base metal. You've got to produce it in large scale. It's not something where you can put in a pocket and walk and carry it across, right? It still has to be a large scale.
And just for some context, pretty much anyone who has a bank account in Australia has a trading account as well. It's typically the products that come together.
Yeah.
And pretty much every person I meet socially has some exposure to lithium. They bought Prospect, or they bought.
So
And
this is the white people equivalent of Korokoza.
The question is, why is there hype? It's global. The green energy policy, you won't be able to buy a diesel engine in Europe after 2030, and I think an internal combustion in 2035 or something.
Correct, yeah.
So, hold on to your 323.
Yeah.
Because you won't get a new one.
No.
So there's a big buzz everywhere. And in fact, we don't see the Teslas here, but Sweden's uptake of new registrations is about 50-50. The sort of northern European countries have been pushing this for about 6 or 7 years. So it's generally a global discussion at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tinashe, have we got anyone ready to ask a question?
Not yet, but we do have viewers that are wondering. Musayama is wondering, is George and Rufaro drinking tea?
Yes.
We are.
We are, believe it or not. I'll pour a bit for the camera. So you can satisfy yourself. Eh? There you go.
But we're getting a lot of positive feedback that people are actually enjoying and finding it very informative.
Okay, so while we are waiting for questions from the audience, maybe you guys can, and I'd like to hear both your different takes on how mining, whether or not mining is benefiting the wider economy in Zim. I mean, we talk a lot about it. In fact, maybe before we could get to that, I know Tinashe is very passionate about its contribution to GDP.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, how much is it contributing to GDP?
11%.
Okay. Less than retail?
Less than retail.
And car repairs?
Yes.
Yes, Tinashe describes Zim as one big tuck shop.
Percentage of foreign receipts?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, export, yes. But we really don't care, right? We care about its contribution to the GDP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Let's check what's in your wallet.
But gents, beyond the export proceeds, which by and large remain within the big mining houses and go back again offshore to pay for all the wonderful stuff you need to carry on mining, what good is mining actually doing?
Interesting. The reason I started is because I want to dispute the first point you made, that money goes out. That is not true. Certainly not for us. A large part of it definitely goes towards purchasing the things we need, which are necessarily produced outside the country, and therefore it does eventually leave the country.
Could you quantify for every dollar of export,
how much goes back?
how much do you have to import in terms of the cost of sales?
Import directly and indirectly.
I couldn't tell you that right now. If you had asked me that question before I came here, I would have definitely come with an answer. but it is not an insignificant amount, certainly. Yeah.
Tamsaki, would you say it's
In
80%,
building a
50%?
project, in building a project, about 40% of it is equipment. You can't buy it here. Some
cables.
steel, pipe, commodities you can buy here.
And then
The rest of the project is moving earth, employing people. So maybe if that's a proxy to answer your question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We employ 4,000 people. So those are 4,000 people that were not employed largely 3 years ago. So when you ask whether mining is actually benefiting the country, I would say yes. And if you can imagine, a large part of people that work in mining, it's not by design, it's just the way it is, are largely men, most of whom actually are supporting households. So when you really think about it, well, if they are not supporting their own household, they're probably supporting someone else.
That's even worse.
but no, that's a collective good.
Yeah, correct.
You just call it a collective good.
It's called the multiplier.
So to a large extent, we are definitely that. But also, you only have to visit. We know that Zimbabwe has traditionally been a resource-based country, and there are a lot of towns out there that grew because of mining companies. Sishavane, Shamva, Bindura itself, and if you go there, you will see that when mining companies are operating, there's a vibrant community. Schools are working, all that is happening. When the mines are down, a lot of them are really struggling. So I do think that mining is a very important part of our economy. I think it is contributing extreme amounts of money and livelihood within our country. I also think that some of it goes unmeasured. You don't like anecdotes? I have plenty of them. So,
Sorry, I'm doing it actually. Is this
yes,
premiums?
I had to overcompensate for liking numbers. So I developed a love of anecdotes. We didn't invite them. They were there, legally or illegally. If you went down to Sandawana at a time when there were a lot of Makorokosas, just by the roads, there were a lot of people selling things. It's a microcosm of the kind of economics that happen when a mining company is doing well in a particular place. So we are a big contributor to the economy. Kubimba Mining House itself, and we are by no means the only ones, we received just under $400 million for the financial year 2022. All of that money came back into this country because we are pretty much locally owned, right? Yeah, you're right. Some of it went to buying necessary equipment and machinery to keep our mines going. But a large part of it is staying in this country, including some of it that was necessarily taken by the 40% rule, which ended up in other parts of government.
A lot of this, yeah. we benefited from the 40% in pick and pay.
I was going to say that. Actually,
oh, sorry, did I say a brand? Sorry.
You're going to be in trouble with Ranga.
I was going to pick that up and say that I actually think that the mining sector, for all they're doing in our society, is you contribute the imports over the foreign exchange, Reserve Bank foreign exchange. It's a 4 billion over the last 2 years, and that 4 billion was actually coming from the mining sector, which really I don't understand why you would subsidize a guy who's importing Glenfiddich.
No, I'm happy. I'm happy.
Their source, their usual source. I mean,
Rufaro is very good at spotting good bargains.
Doesn't it, from a policymaker, do you think that the policymaker has been disadvantaged in the mining sector? Because you could have done something significant with that $4 billion.
But
before we answer that question, let's give Sam a chance to answer the same question. On, do you think mining is doing good?
Well, I'm not going to give you an objective answer because I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I've been in mining my whole sector, and it's provided for my family pretty well my whole career.
But you come from an agricultural family.
Yeah.
And when you look at you've been in both sectors.
I mean, agriculture.
Since we're throwing anecdotes around.
Yeah, they just don't meet in the bar. They tend to, one grows things and one digs things. They have different ethical compasses. But Western Australia, we could talk about that. During COVID, we ran a $6 billion surplus with 2 million people. Okay, so that builds a lot of roads, highways, trains as far as you can see, probably about 500 kilometers of cycle path in the city. What's that going to do? That's going to bring people. It's going to make it attractive to live there. Low cost power is available, and so that's a mining sector. What else do we do? Very little else. Bit of tourism. So I quite like what mining brings. Corporate social impact is always high. Lots of responsibility in the current operating environment. You need that social license. You've got to build schools. You've got to help address the needs of your community. But without them, if you don't have your community on board, you know better than me.
Well, you're supporting fizzy drinks, cooking oil, importation of cooking oil, fizzy drinks.
Look how people then allocate the money they receive, right, including the government, is no longer a mining policy. That is now up to them. This is not. It is not for us to say where you pay.
Sorry, we haven't been able to get Dr. John on the show.
we're not the policy makers in terms of how the money is then spent after that.
Fair enough. I see Josh Chifamba would like to ask a question. Would you?
Yeah.
Would you like to go ahead, Josh?
You can unmute yourself.
Yes, thanks, George. Yeah, thanks, George. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, fantastic. I just want to. I didn't quite get what the answer was. Lithium or any resource is finite or not finite.
So, sorry, you broke up there, but I think you're saying that you didn't quite get the answer on whether lithium is finite or not,
Resources.
or any
Precisely,
other
yes.
resource.
They of course
Yes.
are.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
what's in the ground is what's
Yeah.
in the ground.
Correct.
But, you know, at this point it's economical to dig to 10 meters if you find gold. In 100 years they'll be digging up Sandawanas Road to make batteries.
Correct.
It's finite, but as the economics expands,
Correct.
it justifies a greater resource than you thought you had, I think is what you probably
Yes. Absolutely.
I hope you got that, Josh. But I think the long and short of it is that the team is saying finity or infinity really depends on the economics at the time.
Yes, and technology. It's kind of like that Methuselah problem, right? Where at some point economists were very much thinking that the world was going to actually grow too big and run out of food, and there would be mayhem. What they didn't take into account was, for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, between the two world wars, there was a large expansion in our ability to grow, to produce fertilizer, and we had high yields which supported much larger populations. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what the technology is in the future for what might currently seem finite to become a little bit more than it is today, or a little bit more economical.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else would like to ask a question, please just put up your hand. I'm just going to come back to you, both of you, on the issue of is mining doing good? So there have been a lot of accusations on transfer pricing, externalization of currency,
Questions.
over-invoicing. Would one of you like to take that quickly? And then we'll go back to the questions we have on Twitter.
Well, we're a locally owned company, so we don't externalize any money.
That's your story, and you're sticking with it.
Thank you. That's the long and short. There is no transfer pricing to happen for us.
There's no transfer
yeah,
pricing.
because we are local.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've actually don't have a deep pool of experience to delve into, to be honest, within Zim. I've not operated actually here, so. But you know, the more complicated the policy gets, and the more policies to fix the policies, perhaps the more opportunities arise. So this is a contesting argument to simplify things, as well as to intensify the regulatory framework, which I think we described needed a mixed method. It's not one shoe for all.
Yeah.
So
Okay. We've got a request from Anton. Anton, you can go ahead. Antonio, you can unmute and then you can go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
The question I just had is so I know it's confusing around the bush about transfer pricing and market optimization for accounts. And my question goes to this: so if Kuvimba is a predominantly internally, how does that prove that no externalization and no invoicing and such thing happens? How do you know it doesn't happen? That to me sounds sort of, I don't know. It just feels like a weird
Well,
sorry, before you come in, Simba, I think some of the audience might not have picked up the gist of the question. But I think the gist of the question is Simba said they don't transfer price because they're a local company.
Mm-hmm.
And what Antonio is asking is, well,
don't
how
know.
does it follow that
Mm-hmm.
if you're a local company, you don't externalize?
Okay. Well, it's a very good question, and it doesn't always follow. That's why I said for us, it is not happening. So firstly, I am stating so. But secondly, transfer pricing tends to happen because the motivation for it is an entity outside of a system that would like to be able to get the funds out, but pretend as if it's within the system, right? So I own a company within South Africa, and I can charge inflated amounts so that I can bring the money outside and avoid paying tax and or taking it out as dividends or profits, which may attract a higher tax rate. So we don't have that motivation because we are not outside the country for us to try and take the money out in a manner that avoids paying a higher tax rate if we were just doing it as pure dividends.
Okay. Talk More has got a question, and it goes, there's an outcry from the small-scale miners or delayed payments. This is to Kurimba. Can you shed some light on what is causing the delayed payments, and is this going to be cleared in the short term?
That's a very interesting question because I really can't answer that without knowing which ones they are. Okay. But I think as far as we can, we try to settle our bills as quickly as we can. We generally have a trade cycle that goes up to 45 days based obviously on the fact that when we export our minerals, we also get them within a certain period of time. And sometimes that may necessarily mean an unmatched timeline between when a small-scale supplier might expect their money. Okay. But I don't think that it is necessarily a Covimba policy, nor is it a Covimba problem versus an industry matter.
Problem. Okay.
Yeah, but maybe he can. I was going to give my CFO's number, but I won't.
All right, no. I think that's enough
because you kill me. He can always write.
I think
to
that's
us
enough. We don't have much time, so yeah. I've got another question, and this could be for Sam. What do young people like me have to do to get into the lithium market? And this is from Prince Maposa.
Prince. Well, it feels a bit like the gold fever, you know. Like I would always recommend with. I think we're still quite young, but anyway, we should all be upskilling. Prince should be upskilling. He shouldn't be chasing dollar signs unless upskilling hasn't worked for him. And you know, it's education. That's what he should get into. Getting into lithium, as far as I can see, is really about getting some competencies in mining, and you know, eventually he might, you know, run a lithium business. But in the short term, I think the answer for Prince is probably not that helpful. That's how we all found advice.
Or maybe get a trading account like your mates in
Australia. But I might also just encourage Prince to maybe rethink getting into lithium as opposed to getting into mining. And that's a much easier path than saying I want to get into lithium specifically, because that necessarily pigeonholes you into the one area.
And Prince, one of the things we've said on the show before, and I think the three of us certainly believe quite strongly, is learn a skill, preferably a practical skill like engineering, and travel. That's going to open a lot of doors for you.
Agreed.
Okay.
Anyway?
Let me just check YouTube.
Okay. A diesel fitter. I'll give you an example. Yeah. I know we're focusing on Zim, but a diesel fitter in Western Australia, which is a trade, you can do it as an apprentice, 280 Aussie per year.
280,000 Aussie dollars.
Yeah.
That's around 250,000 US dollars.
A bit less, but you're working 50% of the time. You'll work remotely, week on, week off. And why? Because it's a market dynamic. There's not enough people who want to change piston rings on a diesel engine.
I should add to that actually. The biggest shortage we have in Coimbra Mining House is for diesel fitters.
Really?
Oh.
Yes.
Is it too late for me to learn again?
It's universal.
Yeah, it's universal. It's in the mining industry.
The remuneration
generally.
is as generous as in Western Australia.
It's actually pretty well, but the mining industry, because of the shortage of diesel fitters, is chasing the salaries higher and higher actually. So they are improving. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so Tabani says, I did not get the response on beneficiation. What is the minimum level of beneficiation required by the SI, and is it feasible? Follow-up, is the industry happy with the minimum preferred exporting unprocessed? I suppose they're asking, what does the SI actually say?
And what's the industry's attitude to the SI? I had deftly avoided that, but the people have spoken.
I think we are still to get specific details on what truly beneficiation means. What is clear is what unprocessed means, because that's very easy for us to be able to say. If you just take it out of the ground and it's below a certain grade, it's you cannot export it. We are still waiting for guidance on what true beneficiation is, but the SI itself isn't really talking about beneficiation more than it is talking about processing.
Okay.
So the selling of unprocessed lithium, and we can all debate on what processing means, but we are waiting for those guidelines, which I think are being issued shortly. What is our attitude towards it? As a Zimbabwean, we support it. We think that there should be some level of value addition. As a miner, I'll go back to what Sam said earlier. Sometimes you can get iron ore out of the ground and literally, wash it with a hose pipe and sell it, and you make a lot more money than if you try to put $1 billion plant in the country.
Brilliant. Okay, I've got another question, and this is for Sam, and this is on perceptions that some people abroad have that it does not match with your experience on the ground. And the question is, what do you say to those investors so that they look at Zim today and Zim as a jurisdiction? What can you say to the investing community?
It's interesting because I've worked in probably about 9 or 10 countries, so I've had the benefit of seeing other attitudes and responses to other countries. What I would say is that globally, Zim has just got an abundance of competition for attracting capital. So Zimbabwe happens to have a reputation, and it's proven, of expropriation. It's one of the cardinal sins, and unwinding it is going to take a lot of reputational effort. And so I think the big issue, that what I say to people is, I give them the opportunity. I mean, there's nothing better than an example. We did return an investment. We brought in $45 million, and we paid all our dues. We distributed some of the proceeds here, and we paid our shareholders back. So there's a good example there that I'm able to roll out if people ask me. So I'm able to use my examples to platform the discussion. But it's a much bigger discussion. I mean, we don't talk here about Central America or Southeast Asia, but all those countries have their own risk issues, and they're all trying to repair them globally. And it's about international reputational repair. And I think Zim's taken the right steps, but so the trajectory is right. The question is, where are you on the curve?
Just needs to do a lot more.
A lot more, yeah.
Okay.
I can't single-handedly have any impact, but
okay. But if you were, and this is to both of you, if you were to think of 3 things that the policymaker or us as Zimbabwe need to do right away, what would be your top 3 things?
Look, I think the policies that we often have are adequate. I feel Zim has a over-policed productive sector because it's extractive and it's bringing in foreign receipts. There's a perception that more can be extracted from the extractors. And so I'd say the policy is adequate, and it just needs to be policed and implemented properly. Even beneficiation, there's actually a law against. There's an existing policy that deals adequately, in my opinion, with it, and it just needs to be implemented and adequately policed. So that's one. 2, I think, would probably policy stability is the same as You know, they want to see independence, they want to see transparency. I don't know how to measure that or how to recommend that we address that, but that's a big thing for the international community. So doing what you said you'd do,
So consistency,
it,
so
and then
stability,
doing it.
and then the consistency of that policy.
I'm going to do this
for
over
longer
4
term.
years, and after 4 years, I say, look how I went, and you can come parachute in and have a look at how I went. So a bit of transparency, a bit more of a sort of open attitude towards business, I think is probably my second one.
Yeah. I think roughly the same. I might just add that perhaps we need to be a little bit more trusting of capital markets and not try to intervene too much in them, and hence allow flow of money in and out of the country. So therefore, when investors from outside the country put their money in, they must have the ability to take that money out.
You're going to get fined.
Thank you, George.
And it's not even drinking.
I wonder what you'd say if you were drinking. What?
No, but it's refreshing to hear it coming from a person like you.
Well, like I said, it is not I'm not here to speak about Kulimba Mining House policy. I'm here to speak about my own views on it. That's why it's Friday Drinks after all.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions?
No, I think people had fun and they really thoroughly enjoyed the chat, actually. Yeah.
Can we ask a question? Well, we've got an audience member who's got a question, but unfortunately, you've got to come close to the microphone. No, you can talk from there.
Can you point the camera here this way? Yeah.
So I've got two questions. The first one is, you guys are huge power consumers, and all the rage is alternative power, solar, and so on. If you look at the cost that it took to build the hydro station in Kariba and all that, I think it's about 400 million at the time. It's much cheaper to go hydro and thermal than it is to go solar, and your footprint has to be larger when you go solar. Are you guys buying into, alternative energy as huge power consumers?
Yes.
That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, as miners, I think your footprint in communities where your mines are located is lighter and lighter. The traditional community, I could be wrong, the traditional miners, you remember when it was Anglo, when it was whatever, Lonro, you knew when there's a mine, schools, clinics, roads, the works. Now it's almost a hit job. You come in, you extract, you disappear. Thank you.
It's Friday Drinks.
Do we have any other audience questions? No. So, I think those were both for you, Simon.
Well, he was looking at me, but I think Sam will help at some point. So I guess we'll start with the first question with regards to energy. First and foremost, as mining companies, we are huge consumers of energy. We need energy, full stop. Let's first accept that as a given. The source of that energy is really determined by a lot of other things, including the fact that the world currently demands that we look for alternative sources of energy, i.e. clean energy. So there is a lot of need for us to also go green in our production. And that is what might drive some of the more expensive energy generating sources, purely because we are trying to go green. And the world is accepting that there's a greater cost to do so, and is willing to do so because there's a belief that the longer term benefits of a cleaner world will trump the shorter term needs of cheap energy. The third part of it is really on energy, is that we may necessarily go via a route of getting certain sources of energy by necessity. If the energy infrastructure is not working and we still need energy, to my first point, then we may actually go for any method that we think would be able to give us energy. So there's what is necessary for us, and then there's also what the world is currently demanding in order for us to stay in business. With regards to the footprint of mining companies, I don't speak for all mining companies, but most towns that I've visited where mines are still a very important part of that. Another anecdote, if you go to Bindura right now, there's a primary school called Bindura Nickel Corporation Primary School and High School, which has about 1,400 students. I think we are still an important part of the Bindura community.
Well, I want to push back a bit.
So you're not a one-day international?
No, we're not.
I want to push back on that. I mean, let's talk about something that's newer. It's older and it's new, but let's talk about Sandawana.
Yes.
Let's talk about Arcadia.
Mm-hmm.
Was the school built at Arcadia? Is the school part of the mine development plan at Sandawana?
Absolutely. We wouldn't even get any permitting without those plans.
We've been there 6 years, and last year we built the grade 7 classroom. So next it would be a senior school.
Correct.
Yeah. And in fact, in the 26 wards in Goromanzi, that was the only school built in the last 10 years. So Goromanzi, as close as it is to Harare, is very deprived. So it's possible to have quite a high impact easily. And I think to the point of the question, I've been on mine sites where you've got everything you need at home. And that's because that particular mine site required certain skills and services that to attract them, you go, okay, well, now I need middle-aged men and women because those are the skills I need. So I need a school. How am I going to get Bob from Coventry, because he's got the skills I need, to want to fly to Zim to do that job because no one else can do it? Well, I've got to give him a school, otherwise it's off the charts. So I see, First Quantum building big schools, big communities in Zambia, but that's because there was nothing there. To bring the people, to bring 2,000 people, one has to think like a municipality.
Absolutely.
And so I still see it happening.
Simba's not the only one who might get fired. The producer is getting a little bit upset with me. We need to round up the show. But, gentlemen, it's been lovely. I think it was very insightful. It'll be interesting to see all the comments, but the little glimpses we got sounds like the audience appreciated.
Oh, very much so. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming.
Yes,
it's
it's a
very
pleasure.
enlightening. Yeah.
We hopefully after January, when we have an interesting tipple on the table, you guys will join us again, and we'll have an even more interesting conversation. And
if I still
maybe
have a
light
job.
up one or two of these.
I might not have a job then, so yeah.
No, but certainly we'd love to have a part 2 of this discussion. Definitely, we didn't. I think we didn't touch enough. We didn't touch at all on precious metals. We talked mainly on base metals, and I think there's a lot to be talked about there, and a lot of other things. So you will certainly be getting another invitation. Hopefully, we were not too rude to you, and you'll honor it. To the audience, it's been lovely having you along again. Today, I won't say that we don't know what we're talking about because we had 2 gentlemen here who definitely knew what they were talking about. We hope that you've learned a couple of things that you didn't know, and we hope we've given you ideas and thoughts that you can discuss with people around you, particularly if you've got access to people that make policy, because all we want in the end is to build a better Zimbabwe. Have a lovely weekend. Stay safe. Be good. If you can't be good at it.